record and crack into it. So hello everybody and welcome, and thank you for joining us for this webinar, Fire and Knives. If you are not sure, this is part of the Growing Connections and Confidence webinar series, which is held weekly, same time, same place, 3:30 until the end of term 3. And it's just about supporting our kaiako to grow connections and confidence in the health and physical education learning area. And this whole series is a collaboration between the 4 organisations you can see on the screen below. And you can get more information about the other webinars at the website just below here too. So I would like to give a very warm welcome to our presenter today, Celia Hogan, who is the founder of Little Kiwis Nature Play and also co-chair for Education Outdoors New Zealand. So thank you so much for joining us today, Celia, and offering your time and knowledge. We're super lucky to have you here.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. And before I pass it over to you to introduce yourself as well, I am just going to start us off with a karakia. Feel free to join in, anybody. Tū taua mai I runga, tū taua mai I raro, tū taua mai I roto, tū taua mai I waho, kia tau ai, te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumia kia, kai kie. So I will stop my sharing and pass the screen over to you, Celia. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I'll bring up a share from me as well. Yeah, how's that going? Awesome. So thanks so much for having me. Yep, so we're going to be talking about fire and knives. Just a quick thing about me. So I run a bush kindy and have been running a bush school. We're stopping that now though, but yeah, bush kindy. So I'm working with young children and we're doing a lot of outdoor stuff, including fire and knives, but I also run a lot of workshops for adults. So end up helping teachers to understand how to use fire and knives safely with their students at all age ranges, from early childhood, primary and secondary. So we're going to be looking at how I use knives with children, how we teach fire, looking at some of the safety considerations, and then we'll just do a bit of brainstorm around curriculum. And then if we have time, we'll talk about kind of incidents that, like the things that worry people the most. I guess the thing is this conference was going to be face-to-face, and so this was going to be a face-to-face workshop. So this is probably a bit outside my comfort zone, going, oh, how am I going to teach fire and knives effectively over webinar? So I thought, oh, I'm going to get my children to help me, and I paid them $5 each to do some videoing with me. So I'm going to show them teaching you how to use fire and knives. So I thought that would be kind of a bit more of an interactive way of doing it. So with knives, you know, sometimes people get scared, like, oh, you know, there's too much that could go wrong. There can be fear, and you just imagine that it's around like your comfort zone. When we're comfortable with things, that's easy to do with our students, and when it's a bit uncomfortable, sometimes that can seem too far off. So this is about helping bring that more into your comfort zones a little bit. Ultimately though, you know, I encourage you after this workshop is to go away and find yourself a knife and practice whittling and firelighting if you can. So let us have a look at this first video. The sound's pretty quiet, so you might just have to strain to hear, and then we'll talk after. And so show us the movement. How do you Yeah. Cool. Thank you. And Aria, can you help us with the positions that you could be in for Whitley? What are the 3 positions you could be in? Standing up. Yep. Sitting down and pushing up. Yeah. And so when you're in those positions, you're staying still. Yep. Staying still. Fantastic. Right now, how do we hold a Whitley knife? So you take the knife out of the pocket, you round it like this, put the hand here, front here, and you start with. Right. So I'm using my hand to knife this, and I start. Right, being aware of the circle of safety. And also, yeah, so if someone comes into your circle of safety, stop. And what kind of angle are you using with your knife? No angle. And what kind of angle? Angle of the blade. So kind of pointy and right. Yeah. Yeah, about a 50, 45 maybe. Somewhere in there. And if it's too hard, you can make the angle go a bit lower, can't you? Cool. So that was my little tamariki. I hope you enjoyed that. A bit more exciting than having me sit here and share that kind of information. So the key kind of things that came out, along with a little funny one where I said, oh, what's the angle? And he thought I said, what anger do you need? I don't know if anyone picked up on that. But key considerations I often share with tamariki when I hold up my knife, I'll say, this is a tool, not a toy. So I can then establish some expected behaviors. So if children or students start teaching it or using it as if it was a toy and, being silly with it, I don't actually give warnings. I just say, hey, I'm just going to take that off you right now because this can cause real harm. And you just need to show me that you can be responsible enough to have this tool. So it's kind of setting up some expectations around that. And, like sometimes, children will start out really good and then they start getting silly and it's like, you can step in there. I'm not super punitive with it. It's a learning opportunity for them. And it's like, right, like if I was to say, right, you can't use this for the next 3 sessions, that's a bit over the top. You will know the students and go, hey, look, if you can show me in this session that you can be more responsible, I'll give it back. Or, hey, let's just wait till next session and just try again then. So just being, not making it too big a deal, but just making it clear that those are your expectations. When they lose focus, that's when they get cut. So they can be whittling away and then kind of looking like that and they'll just catch their hand. And that's quite normal. So as an educator, it's our job to kind of be looking out for when students are starting to lose focus. Many children will stay quite committed the whole way through. Circle of safety, we talked about that. Some people will say, oh, you should have a glove on the non-whittling hand. Well, that you can do that. I choose not to because I feel like you get better grip on a stick or whatever you're using when you're actually holding it with your physical hand. You've got that sensory input, so it makes it really clear for you. When we put a glove on, that can make it the gloves often don't fit all the hands, so that means it can be a bit clumsy and you might not get as good a grip on the stick. I always start with a demonstration, and depending on the age of the students depends on how much information I go into. So, you know, the circle of safety is key, and the angle and how we hold it, and giving a demonstration of that. So I try not to hand out knives before I give a demonstration, because otherwise they don't pay any attention at all. So just doing that circle of safety, what's this for? To keep us safe and to keep other people safe. So just, you know, reiterating those points. And the demonstration. Some kind of forest school practice go into these huge like knife safety talks around, right, and when we're walking with the knife, we do this and we put it down by our side and we walk like this, and when we want to pass the knife, we pass it like this. I'm more of the philosophy of we cover the kind of 2 or 3 main things that are going to keep them the most safe, and then as and when things need to be done, we can then introduce more information. So, okay, you know, it might be, I can see you're wanting to walk around with your knife. This is how we walk with it. We place it back in the sheath and we walk with it down by our side. So it's just those little bits of information I've found seem to work better, especially because I work with a lot of early childhood children, but even into the primary, like you would have seen in that video that my children, you know, loss of interest quite fast. They were just into playing. Like when one was talking, the other one was playing, or that's just how they're made up. And you know, they're 7 and 9. One other common thing that I see is children who haven't used a knife before. They might have the blade facing towards them, and so it's just, you know, making sure that they have their understanding of how the blade works. If I'm introducing, you know, if I'm one teacher and I've got 10 students, I might do it one-on-one, going around the circle, just to help see what their fine motor development is. But yeah, as time goes on, you'll be able to work out, you know, which students you know are going to just be able to manage it, you know, straight up, and which ones are going to need more support. So you know your students best, and, you know, manage it in the way that you feel comfortable with, and then, you know, expand from there. Yeah, and I always say, you know, buying knives that have a sheath, because then whenever they're moving around, they can always put it away safely, and that will minimize risks. Are there any questions coming through around knives?
Celia, Lauren here. Just wanting to check what the 3 positions, because there was sitting, standing, and I couldn't quite hear the other one.
Kneeling. So I guess for me, what I notice with children is that when we say sit, that doesn't always work for all children. And what they often do is when they sit, they have their legs apart, but they often want to whittle between their legs, but their legs don't go very wide. And then the point of the knife, that blade there, can get quite close to, imagine that's their thigh. So, you know, giving them an option of standing or kneeling down beside like a log, and then holding the stick on the log and then whittling away from them, is just keeping their body safer. Does that answer that question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I don't think we talked about that in the video much, as far as when they were actually whittling. Yeah, and as well, you might have noticed in the video that the sticks were quite long. I think long sticks are good because children seem to find it easy if they've got it under their arm. Awesome. I'm going to move on, and there'll be more opportunities at the end. But let's now look at fire. So whittling's a good one with fire, because you can whittle sticks to cook damper on them and that kind of thing. So for fire, I've done another wee video my children have. This is a little bit longer, and it's going to go through the process of kind of setting up a fire and some of the things I talk to students about before we light it, and then they're going to be lighting it with flint and steel. So just listen closely, and if you can't quite hear anything, just we'll ask some questions at the end. So here is our fire pit area. We have the portable fire bulb that we use. So first I just want to talk about our environment and the safety kind of things that we think about here. So first up, we're thinking about, the environment that we're in. What's the ground like? We're in the middle of winter right now, so it's really wet, so that's good. But I've also just kind of, sweep away some of these small things that are a bit tindery, especially in the drier season. But just getting down to the ground is a really good idea, and especially if you're making a fire onto the ground. So making sure you're back down to the ground if you don't have a fire bowl for sure. And just clearing everything away and any other hazards in the area like sticks or things that could people trip over. That's the kind of ground. The next thing I'm also thinking about is what's above us. How much space have we got above our fire? Have we got any low-hanging branches down that may come in or catch fire? So we're pretty clear in this space. We do have some big trees, but they're quite high, and it's quite a sheltered space for us here. I'm also thinking about the weather. What's the weather doing? Have we got strong winds coming in? Is it pouring with rain? It's going to make it pretty hard to light the fire. And then we're also thinking about the seasons and if there are any fire bans on. And you can check those out at checkitsallrights.co.nz.
That's great provided. If you miss it, stick on and make sure it's sleeping these and more of stick wood.
Yeah, so they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so having it in these kind of piles is quite a good idea, isn't it? Because then we can see, we start with this pile here, then these. Absolutely. Thank you. So when we come to setting the fire, we will start talking to our tamariki about that this is now a fire space, and so that there's no playing in here and it's a walking zone. But if you want to walk to the other side of the fire, you head out around the outside of the wooden rounds or the seats, and you walk around the outside. So we just talk about some of those kind of boundary things. Depending on the number of students you have and the number of teachers will depend on how you manage it. So I'm just going to give a general idea of what we do to set the fire. So tamariki, would you guys like to put the paper on the fire? So we're going to start up some paper, and this is part of our fuel. Okay. So we're going to put some paper in the middle there, and then we're going to add some more. So we've got something that can light kind of easily, and we can add some more of our tinder as well. Do you want to get some tinder? And then around the tinder, we're going to put some smaller kindling. Now, because it is this time of year, we are relying on dry wood, because all our collected wood is very wet. So, do you guys want to set it into maybe like a teepee or try and do a construction? Mary, do you want to set some pieces? Fantastic. So, what three things does a fire need to go? What three things does a fire need to go?
Air.
Yeah, oxygen.
Heat.
Yeah, heat, like so from a match or a flame. Yeah.
And wood.
Yeah, which is the fuel. Okay, so the air's coming in. We've got the fuel here, and we just need the heat. Yes. Right. Last couple of safety things. We've got a bucket of water sitting nice and close. Very important. And we also talk about once we've lit the fire, that once it's lit, we can then stand back and move away so that the fire can find its rhythm, and we can understand which way the breeze is kind of pushing the fire, and then we can stand and choose where to stand safely. Any other safety things we need to think about? Yeah. What about tying hair back and loose clothing? And making sure if any long hair is tied back is good, and anything that's kind of dangling or hanging clothing wise. So today we're going to be using flint and steel to start our fires. And the reason I love using this with tamariki is because it takes quite a lot of effort and persistence to start a fire in this way. Rather than if we use matches or a lighter, then tamariki kind of, oh, let's get a big fire. But when we do this, just getting any kind of fire is really amazing. So it's not about the size of the fire, it's the, oh my gosh, we actually made a fire ourselves. So there's also a bit of mastery in there, and just really feeling proud that someone's been able to persist long enough to be able to get a flame or work as a group to help start a fire. So how it works is we have the flint here and steel, and you take it from flat on there just up to a slight angle and you push it away from you, and pushing it long even strokes, and then spark. So with the spark, you're trying to hold it down into the fire pit close to the tinder, and with some of our younger children we use cotton wool to help start a fire. And yeah, so that cotton wool gets teased out and we can then get that fire started. So I've got some cotton wool here. Ari, do you want to take some of that? I think you've got some. So I've just teased that out so you can see how this works. Okay, so we've got some fire on both of them. That's good. So now at this stage, depending on how long your children have been working with fire, will depend on if they are involved in this or they step back and someone else comes in. And so we just want to make sure that there's enough air coming through some of those sections. There we go. Because there's a little breeze, there's a lot of air coming through, but sometimes we'll need to blow just in the side to help get the flames going. So just added in some tinder to the top, which has helped bring the flames up through, catching some of that wood on fire. Looking good. Does it need any blowing, Luke, or do you think it's looking pretty good? Cool. As it's starting to go a bit, you can just start putting some of these slightly bigger pieces on there. Cool. So when our marshmallow is ready to eat, how many seconds do we count to before we put it in our mouth?
This many.
10. And why do we do that? Yeah. Yeah. So it might burn your tongue. Awesome. Fantastic. I hope you enjoyed that little video. So, you know, the main things I do talk about is just getting children to understand those three kind of elements of what starts a fire, what creates it, how to light it. So, you know, in a full session, students would go out and collect that tinder and the little sticks and organise it into piles and get themselves sorted in that way. there's different ways to manage groups, and it's going to totally depend on the makeup. So for us at our bush kindy, we have, you know, parent ratio in there. And so that really helps with student numbers. If you're in a school, you might have a couple of teachers for the whole group. So you might start with some more kind of stringent boundaries, as in, you know, there's only 2 people who come in and light the fire, or there's, you know, they set it and everyone else has to sit around the logs and outside. So it just totally depends on how comfortable you are and how well you know your students. If you know you can trust them, it might be a different kind of setup. You might just let them be how they are and trust that they will be okay. But when we're building confidence in this space, I do recommend starting with a more stringent boundary, just saying, right, everyone must, you know, stay in that seated circle and be invited into the middle, just until you get your confidence up. And then you'll kind of get that feeling of, oh yeah, no, I feel good now. I understand how the children behave in this environment, and take it from there. So this example is of one kind of group fire, and, you know, managing the cooking around that. Sometimes it's like, okay, we'll do this in stages. So we'll have a group of 10 do theirs first, and then another group, because if you've got 20 to 30 students all trying to cook their food at the same time, that doesn't necessarily work so well. So it's kind of just thinking about those kinds of things and how you're going to manage that, and setting those expectations up before you get into it. What I love about this photo is, like, we've been doing bush kindy for a long time, and we often talk about learning injuries versus life-altering injuries. And so the children, you know, they've got bare feet, 2 of them, and they're all playing with sticks in the fire. And so we're often managing that kind of balance between learning injuries and life-altering injuries. And so a learning injury is something where it's a cut, bruise, scratch, you know, a small burn, just like a spark or something like that. Whereas life-altering injuries is where there is potential for significant harm to that person. So we're kind of balancing that up. We know these children really well, and we know that they have learned how to be with the fire, and we trust them. But if I was getting a brand new group coming in, I would probably set some different boundaries for that. So, you know, like, sometimes it's really hard when we're setting our safety operational procedures and we kind of write, oh, you know, we'll do this. We have to be a bit more flexible. So we have to set it in a way that allows for us to adapt to the students in the group that we have. What else do I want to say? Yeah, ratios is another question I get a lot. You know, what's the ratios around a fire? Again, it depends how well you know your students. If you have some students with some higher needs or some challenging behaviours, it might be worth having some more adults in that space, either parents coming in to support or teacher ratio, you know, but that's up to you to kind of assess what you think is going to be good. What I do find, and I said it in the video, is that when students are lighting the fire with the flint and steel, they, you know, it's not that huge focus around let's get a big fire, because it actually takes a lot of effort. You saw, like, the first part of that video that, you know, they were sparking away, but they just weren't, we were there maybe 10 minutes or so, but I couldn't keep videoing for 10 minutes. So I was just like I want to show you how we do it. And so that's what I sometimes do with our students. If they've been trying for a long time, I'll scaffold that with a piece of the cotton wool, and they were able to get that pretty quickly. So you can kind of see the difference there. So yeah, just that persistence and that determination. They're just happy with a fire. Cooking on fire, again, that's something to experiment with. You know, at our sessions, we often do damper, sometimes marshmallows. We have done things like stewed apples, so we'll get a pot on the fire. We've done pizza, so we've got an old barbecue plate and just plonked it on a couple of logs and made pizza when the coals got a bit down. What else did I put? Orange peel brownies, so you just make a brownie mixture, scoop out half an orange and then put the brownie mixture in there and just set it around the outside of the fire, and that cooks quite well. So you can be quite inventive, but there's a whole process that goes along with that. So, you know, it might be the first time you make the damper and then they, you know, help you knead the dough. So there can be a big process around that. What I wanted to show you was how I teach some of the adults, so some of the teachers and educators that I work with. I use these fire bowls, and this can be a really good introduction to fire. So I got these bowls from the warehouse for like $12 each. And I start with, like it's a bit of a process. So I start the teachers by whittling a stick and catching the whittled pieces into the bowl. So that becomes the tinder. So they just are all whittling there and catching all those pieces from the sticks into their bowl. Then they have to use their flint and steel to gather some more tinder and use the bits of whittled stick to create their flyer, to then roast a marshmallow on their pointed stick that they just made. So that can be a really good introductory process for students as well. And I've had a lot of teachers who have done this with me in this way. So rather than the big fire, done it with these fire bowls, which I want to make a note, they're not actual fire bowls. They are bowls that can get really hot, and so there are some dangers around that. So it's just recognizing that when the fire does start, it gets really hot. But yeah, the whole process of it seems really achievable for teachers, because it's not about getting a huge fire, it's about starting a fire and just being able to roast a marshmallow. Cool. I wanted to come into just thinking about curriculum and how this can fit into our curriculum. I kind of wrote a few ideas down, and just maybe you could have a think about this and share this in the chat room. I'll ask you a couple of questions and then we'll kind of just have a look at that. So I might even escape out of this. We'll stop sharing. Cool. So just thinking about, you know, from the values of the New Zealand curriculum, or if you're an early learning or early childhood centre teacher, just thinking about, you know, some of those values or the key competencies that we see, or dispositions, and kind of thinking, okay, you know, what did we see when, or what could we see when my children were demonstrating? You know, what are the things that are coming out? You know, like, is it, for example, in the key competencies, what's the thinking that's coming through there? You know, they're constructing knowledge about fire and knives and tools. So just share in the chat room just some of the things that you noticed, that you know about from the curriculum. So key competencies, subject area, values, dispositions, all those kind of things. And I'll just read some out as they come through. And I can find the chat room. It's disappeared from my thing. Oh, there we go. So someone's written exploration. Yeah, they're exploring, you know, their knowledge around fire and what makes a fire, exploring their knowledge around whittling. There's courage, curiosity, perseverance, yeah, to keep going. They're developing their working theories. Fantastic. As far as subject areas, you know, there's a lot of science and natural sciences coming in there. Technology, which is another great one. History and culture. And the reason I say history and culture is, you know, we can go into so many different areas around, okay, well, so this is a tool that we're using to create fire, and another easier tool is a lighter or matches. But how did Māori create fire when, you know, back in the olden days? How did they do that? You know, how did people or different societies create fire? What did they use? And some research around that. You know, how, what materials were used to make that fire, and why those materials? What is it about the properties of those? There's Sophie's coming in with self-management, yeah, managing themselves and And also there's a bit of kaitiaki because they're considering the environment they're in and they're being respectful of the environment. The other thing is, you know, was it different in other parts of New Zealand? So like for knives, if we're talking about tools that Māori used, do they use different tools in different parts of the country depending on the resources that they had? So there's a number of different avenues you can kind of go down there, even into food and preparation, you know, okay, well, what foods can we cook and what resources work best to build up the heat of the fire, and which food needs not much heat and which needs a lot of heat, all that kind of thing. So it's just, there's lots of different things depending on the children's interests and the things that you're covering in your sessions. Yeah, so something else I often bring in when I'm starting, like introducing fire for the first time to a group is stories. And so one common story I use is how Maui brought fire to the world. That's a great story, or any other fire kind of stories that you have. And that can be a really good one to kind of base it from. It's like, okay, well, how did fire come? And you know, there's a number of different trees that are really good for burning their wood. There's also like a bow drill, which is quite technical, and I'm never very good at it, but it's another way of kind of rubbing a stick onto a stone and developing smoke, and then getting the smoke to catch light on some tinder. And so there's lots of things that you could experiment and explore from this. It's also just been put in here many ways this learning could come back to the classroom and be used. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cool. Fantastic. Right, so I just thought I would finish off just talking about just a couple of incidents, because I think, you know, people are like, oh yeah, but what if my child gets cut, or what if someone, you know, burns themselves? What do we do? You know, what does that mean? So I'll talk through two different incidences that one I've heard about, because as far as knives, we've just had small cuts. We haven't had anything big, and we categorize those as learning injuries. So, you know, that's fine. That, you know, they can either just be a little bit of pressure put on, sticky plaster if they need, but generally that's what we expect. They are learning injuries. I had a colleague who had her first kind of, I'll call it, pumping blood experience, and you know, she's been doing it for a good 7 or 8 years as well, and that's her first major incident. And yeah, as an educator, it can always be a bit tricky, but it's just about having yourself ready for, okay, well, what do we do when we get that? And it's just like straight on to compression, and just helping to stop that bleeding. And so just feeling confident in that and making the rest of the group safe. So the key there is probably just getting everyone else to stop, and then dealing with the person. That can be the best way to do it. You know, for that child, they just had to go to hospital, and it just got, you know, stitched up, and that was fine. For fire, we had one wee girl, and it, you know, it was hard being a facilitator on that session, but she was with her mum, and whatever happened, no one actually knows, but she was literally right in front of her mum, and she just fell into the fire with her hands. And it was just like, oh, you just saw everyone's looks going, oh my gosh. She was pulled off the fire straight away. We had the bucket there and got her hand in and started doing that. It was really lucky because we don't have big fires. We intentionally don't have big fires. And that was probably a good thing, because it was just kind of the outer embers of the fire that she landed in. She ended up with superficial burn on her palm, and we got her straight into the hospital because she's so little, and we just wanted to make sure that was okay. So we put it in the water, and then for transportation we had some glad wrap which we wrapped around, and that's how she transported herself to the hospital. It healed really well. She still comes to our bush kindy, and this is 3 years later. So you know, another element of that was we had to reflect and go, oh, is there something we didn't do that we should have done that could have prevented that. So we did go into a bit of a reflection. A reactive response could be, oh, we're going to stop this. We're not doing this again. You know, that's just too dangerous. But for us, you know, the benefits of children exploring with fire and tools is just, it outweighs the risks. You know, it's pretty unlikely that we get anything happening. And the benefits of their confidence, their awareness, their understanding and their respect for the fire and building the skills and knowledge for themselves, it outweighs those potential risks. So we did, instead of going, right, we're stopping fires, we did a full reflection and go, okay, are we following our safety procedures? Yes, we were. Was there something that's missing from our safety procedures? We surveyed the adults in the group, and we didn't really get a huge amount of feedback back that said, oh, you should do this or that. And we ended up sticking with and keeping our health and safety systems, and it was just one of those things. You know, the adult was right there, we were following all the safety guidance, and but it made us very aware, and it made us really intentional about making sure that we definitely cover everything that we meant to in our fire briefing. So that was, it was not a nice experience, but it was a good experience to have and to go through. We also made sure I spoke to the mother a couple of times that week and to see how she's doing. And when she next came back to Bush Kindy, which was the following week, said, look, what would be really good is if we have another fire for her, so that it's still seen as a normal thing, so it doesn't create any trauma for her. Don't make it into a big thing, just to say, hey, we're going back to Bush Kindy, you know, and I think there's going to be a fire this week, and just leave it at that. And it went really well. So it was really good to kind of get back on that horse. Cool. I'm sure I probably missed something, but I'll kind of finish it there. And if there are any questions, maybe Sophie, do you want to manage that?
Yes.
Or if you have any questions.
If anyone else has any questions, feel free to ask now or type them in the chat. Otherwise, we can wrap up there.
Or
I
ask.
was wondering about if you had set any rules about like fire coming out of the fire. I noticed in one of the pictures the kids holding sticks in the fire, or how you handled that, because all kids want to light their stick on fire and then pull it out and wave it around and see the embers glow, or see if they can light another fire with it. Sort of what you do in that.
Yeah, so it'll be up to you. Hi, Matthew. How are you? Good to see you again. For us, we know our children, and our kind of guidelines for them were, if you want to burn sticks, that's fine, but you keep them in the fire. Okay, so if they come out, then that, you know, that could poke an eye or something. And so for us, we're like, you can burn them, but you keep them in there. And as soon as you start taking them out, we have to take the stick off you. So that was for us, and the children were really respectful of that. If you've got, like, we have found those children were early childhood, and so I've found in our bush school sessions there's a bit more gung-ho-ness and pushing the boundaries. So we often just say, oh, look, we're not going to burn sticks because there's just too many people around here. So, you know, the wood stays in the fire, we're not burning our sticks. So yeah, like it depends on who's there and how much they're going to push the boundaries. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thanks.
Also,
yeah,
after everyone's gone, I was just hoping if you could share the first screenshot again with the knives. I'll just take a screenshot of that, but you can do that later.
Yeah, cool. Just with the little thing.
I was going to say, this recording will also be on the NZPTC website as well, so you'll be able to access it. Do we have any more questions?
Cool. Can I ask one more to everyone?
You sure can.
Right, so in the chat room, I'd love to know if it was useful, because obviously it's not a hands-on, and hands-on is much better, but was it still, you know, have you taken away something, and if so, please share that, what that is in the group. Obviously always better in person, but you know, we do what we can in COVID-y kind of times. So I just would really love to hear what people thought and what you've taken away, what's been useful. And if no one writes anything,
I'll start, Celia. I just have to say it's awesome that you've taken the challenge of running a practical session online. I think that's really cool, and it is going to be really useful having this webinar to come back to, because we've recorded it, and I think there's lots of little things in here that I'm going to keep coming back to as well. And I'm like, oh, when can I give my 2-year-old a knife? As a
now,
parent, yeah. I'm going out to get him a knife. So yeah, just I think it's given me a lot of confidence about that really basic ways of doing things. Sometimes we might overthink things too much, so you've structured it in a really basic and simple way.
Cool. Thank you. Anyone else gonna say anything? Or you're good?
Yes, hi.
Australia?
So yes, I do have a t-shirt on.
You do.
It's a bit chilly over here. I wanted to say that I suppose, well, for a start off, I want to just say hats off to my homeland, because you guys are very, very advanced, I think, in the movement of play, of nature play, risky play, you know, all the labels of play.
Yeah.
And so I think this is really, really good. And I'm, I suppose, part of, I suppose, the play movement here in Australia, especially Brisbane as well. And I do work with a organisation called Curious Me, and we have been, I suppose, progressing things, taking our parents on the journey of risky play. Yeah. And recently this winter we had our yarning circle with our fire pit, and everyone who wanted to partake in, you know, like cooking marshmallows or popcorn or something like that, you know, could come along. And it's been really good to kind of see how over the last couple of months the parents have got a lot more confident with letting their children, so we have, you know, from 6 weeks old up to 10 years old, depending on who's there, type of thing. Cool. And that it's not just a age kind of specific activity, that, you know, everything basically that you've said. And I suppose what your webinar has done is kind of just put it in a bit more of a nicer package. And some of my takeaways were, we were considering doing Friday night fires. So, you know, if you come around, you know, after 6 type thing, we'll cook some damper or something like that. So it's not necessarily in the middle of like a play group, so to speak, but it was a specific fire night. And so my takeaway was getting the kids more involved. And because we do go and collect wood, but we have a designated fire starter or fire looker after who manages that, and anyone who walks into the fire pit, you know, is kind of under his eyes. But we don't have that beginning part, so we're not a education centre or anything like that, but that part I think we could start to include. And the comment about the flint, I thought that's really good, because we just use matches, so that aspect is good too. And then I was just having a giggle with what Matthew mentioned about kids lighting sticks and wanting to I was like, we've never heard of that from our group until we went to another particular area where we facilitated a fire, and they all wanted to burn sticks and run off out of the fire pit with it, and we're like, what is this? So I suppose listening to some of the other aspects there is just giving me a little bit more of an open view of what other things we can look out for when we do engage with newer children, that we're just kind of assessing, you know, where's your level of confidence with that sort of stuff.
Cool.
So I kind of gone off the
no, that's
radar,
good.
but
That's good.
just wanted to share that.
And I guess like a reflection for me, and just to share with everyone, if you haven't, like I'm sure most people have probably done fires, but when you have your own students, you're thinking about it differently. And it's not like we've ever got it always right. You know, we've learned through mistakes. And, you know, I think the first time we learned about the stick thing was we've been running it with our bush kindy, and we're like, oh, we can just run it the same way.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work like that. So you have to just be adaptable and be okay with going, oh, hey, just time out for a moment. I'm just noticing that when you put those sticks in the fire, you're then coming out and they're getting really close to other people's faces.
Yeah.
What should we be doing? You know, what do you guys think we should be doing? And just facilitating ideas from students. I think that's a really good way of like you said, involving them in it, but it's getting them to think about the risk management rather than it's not the teacher's job only, that we need to be empowering the students to manage the risks as well. And they can come up and go, oh no, we think it's fine. Like, I'm not feeling that comfortable with it because I know that a stick to the eye is bad enough, but a burning stick to the eye could be quite dangerous. So I'm actually going to make a call. I hear what you've said, but we're actually going to just keep the sticks in the fire, or we're not going to do that anymore. Yeah, and so you can manage that. Awesome. Thanks so much, Therese. I'm just going to read a couple of these other ones out. So Lauren has said, great to see the way you sit when whittling, like ideas for the fire pit cooking, and like ideas is Kako to have a go with the fire bowl. Awesome. Marika, I hope I pronounced that properly. I have done fire with my home-based tamariki for some time, but found your thoughts on the broader thoughts of the history of fire and tools and cooking very helpful. Yeah, cool. And I think that can be quite interesting for students as well. And just, you know, where does fire come from? Like, you know, or how did other people use fire? I think it's really interesting. Jasmine, very useful, thanks. Helpful reinforcement of calm boundaries around knife and fire mahi. Nice way of balancing respect and activities with risks. Thank you. And then Matthew gave me some good discussion ideas for around the fire, looking at history and culture, also confidence to give the students knives. Fantastic. Hey, thanks everyone for your feedback. If there's no further questions, I will hand over to Sophie to close.
Awesome. Thank you, team. I just want to say, big thank you to you all for joining us today. I know your time's very precious. It's been a hard winter, staff are sick, whānau are sick. It hasn't been an easy year, so thank you for coming along. And Celia, a big mihi to you for being so willing to share your time and pay your children to star in the show. And obviously that's, you know, taken a lot of your own time to go and make that. And this is going to be a really awesome resource to look back on, especially for, lots of other people that signed up for this that couldn't be here today. If you haven't checked out Celia's website, littlekiwisnatureplay.com, I know she's got some awesome free resources on there, and also runs PLD where you can do all sorts of awesome things with her. So thank you for keeping it practical, even though we couldn't meet in person. And like you said, like this links to so many parts of our curriculum. It's not an extra or an add-on. It's that real learning in a real context. So be excited to hear about people getting out there to give it a go. I'm just going to share my screen and close with a karakia. When I can pull that up. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay. E whakaiatanga e, te whakaiatanga e, tēnei te kaupapa ka ia, tēnei te wānanga ka ia, te mauri o te kaupapa ka whakamoia, te mauri o te wānanga ka whakamoia, koa ki runga, koa ki raro, haumie, huie, tai ki e. Thank you, everybody, for coming along. I will stop that recording now.